Now, I've heard plenty of proposals in my time. Some mumbled over a kitchen table after years of meaning to get around to it. Some rehearsed so carefully they came out sounding like somebody else's words. But I've never heard of one quite like what Nell Arden did on the front porch of Ridley's boarding house in Redfield, Texas, on a Tuesday afternoon in the spring of 1887. She said it loud enough for the whole street to hear, and she meant every syllable. "I will marry any man in this town who agrees to one condition. He will not ask about my past, not today, not ever." She was standing straight-backed when she said it. Dusty boots, a carpet bag with a broken clasp at her feet, and $7 folded inside the lining of her left glove, every cent she had in the world. She was 27 years old, though the kind of tired she carried made the number irrelevant. There are women who look worn from years of hard living. Nell looked worn because life had been specific. She counted the men in earshot. 14, she figured, 3 on the mercantile porch across the street, 4 loading freight outside the land office, the barber shaking his cloth in the doorway. A cluster of women stood near the dry goods window, and every one of them went quiet. Nell watched their faces and saw exactly what she expected. Confusion. Disapproval. One expression that might have been pity. Nobody answered. A horse stamped in the dust, and the sound of it seemed to belong to some other afternoon entirely. Then a voice came from the side of the building, low, unhurried, belonging to a man sitting on an overturned crate with his hat pulled down past his eyes. "I'll do it." Every head on the street turned. Nell's turned last. She was already learning that the speed at which you react tells people how much you have to lose. His name was Cade Mercer. She would learn the rest soon enough. The whole town would make certain of that. Mrs. Ridley, the boarding house owner, told Nell before the plates were cleared. Cade Mercer had killed a man 4 years ago. Killed, Nell said. Mrs. Ridley didn't pause. The details shifted depending on who told it. A card game, a debt, a fight outside the rail depot in San Antonio, but the ending was always the same. A man named Dunbar was dead, and Cade had stood over him holding a knife he hadn't owned that morning. A jury gave him 18 months in county jail. He served 14, came back to Redfield, and bought 12 acres on the east edge of town with money nobody could account for. Quiet since, avoided. The kind of man people crossed the street to get away from, not because they knew what he'd done, but because they decided what it meant. "You don't have to go through with it," Mrs. Ridley said, setting a plate of beans in front of Nell like a peace offering. No one would hold it against you. Nell ate the beans. She'd held enough against herself for long enough. One more opinion wasn't going to change the arithmetic. They married at the county courthouse on Thursday morning. The clerk, a young man with spectacles and ink-stained cuffs who'd clearly heard the story already, read the words with the particular care of someone trying not to look like he was staring. 2 witnesses from the lumber yard signed the register. Cade wore a clean shirt. Nell wore the only dress that didn't smell like 3 weeks on a stagecoach. When the clerk said, "You may kiss the bride," neither of them moved. The clerk stamped the marriage certificate, slid it across the counter, and said congratulations to the space between them. Cade's property sat at the edge of town. 2 rooms, a kitchen that served as everything else, and a porch that faced south toward country so flat Nell could see the heat coming off it in waves. A barn that held 1 horse. A well that produced water the color of weak tea. He gave her the bedroom. He slept in the barn. On the first morning she found coffee already made on the stove, and Cade gone out, mending a fence line on the north boundary, working with the steady rhythm of a man who'd made peace with doing things alone. They didn't speak that first day, or the second. By the third, Nell had cleaned the kitchen, rehung the door that stuck on its frame, and inventoried the pantry, flour, salt, dried beef, and 4 tins of peaches stacked with the labels facing the same direction. "You line up your tins," she said when he came in that evening. He glanced at the shelf. They fit better that way. That detail told her something about Cade Mercer, though she couldn't have said exactly what. The first time he learned something about her was an accident. He came through the kitchen door fast on the fourth night. A coyote had spooked the horse, and he'd forgotten his rope, and the door hit the wall with a sound like a fist on wood. Nell dropped the plate she was drying. Not the way people drop things when startled. She dropped low, one arm over her face, shoulders curled inward. The posture of someone who'd learned a long time ago what follows a door hitting a wall. By the time she straightened, Cade was standing very still in the doorway. He didn't ask. He picked up the broken plate, set the pieces on the counter, and went back out for his rope. Neither of them mentioned it. But the next evening he knocked before entering his own kitchen. And every evening after that. "You don't have to knock," she told him on the sixth night. "It's your house. It's our house," he said, "and I'll knock." Now, if you're listening to this somewhere, late at night, on a long drive, sitting with your own kind of silence, let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision that looked desperate from the outside, but felt like the calmest thing you'd ever done? Not panic. Ariphytic. If that sounds familiar, I'd be grateful to hear it. A word or two in the comments tells me someone's out there. The town made its position known within the week. Mrs. Hatch at the dry goods store overcharged her 11 cents on a pound of sugar and didn't flinch when Nell pointed to the posted price. "Must have changed this morning," she said, and turned to the next customer. At church on Sunday, Nell went alone. Cade didn't attend. The pew beside her stayed empty in both directions. After the service, a woman she hadn't met leaned toward her husband and said something that included the word Mercer and the word shame, and both of them looked at Nell's ring like it was stolen property. She walked home along the trade road and did not cry. Crying required a kind of surprise she'd run out of a long time ago. That same week, a land assessor from the county passed through Redfield. He stopped at Cade's property to confirm the boundary markers routine, he said, ahead of the new survey season. Nell was outside hanging laundry. The assessor pulled a folded map from his saddlebag and asked if Mr. Mercer was available. "I can read a survey map," Nell said. The assessor hesitated. Nell took the map, unfolded it on the fence rail, and pointed to 3 discrepancies between the plotted boundary and the physical markers she'd already walked herself. The eastern line was off by 14 feet. The southern corner post sat on Halston's side of the original deed line. And the creek easement, which the county had recorded as public access, was actually within the property boundary according to the original deed filed in 1881. "Your husband might want to file a correction," the assessor said when she'd finished. "I'll handle it," Nell said. After he rode off, Cade came from the barn. He'd heard everything. "Where'd you learn to read a survey map?" he asked. "My father was a landman," she said. It was the first true thing she'd told anyone about her past since arriving in Redfield, and she said it before she could stop herself. She turned back to the laundry and didn't offer anything more. Cade watched her for a moment. Then he went back to the barn. What she did in the weeks that followed was watch him. And what she noticed was that Cade Mercer lived in a way that didn't match the story the town kept telling about him. He mended his fence line and then kept going, fixed the section on the neighbor's side too. A rancher named Halston who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. Halston said nothing, but the broken section didn't come back. Cade hauled water for the widow 2 lots down when her well rope snapped, left it at her door before dawn, and never said a word about it. When a coyote got into Mrs. Ridley's hen house, and the boarding house woman complained at the general store that nobody in this town looks after anyone, Cade built a wire enclosure and set it up on a Tuesday afternoon while she was at the post office. Nobody thanked him for any of it. "Why do you bother?" Nell asked one afternoon, watching him load fence posts into the wagon for Halston's side of the property line. "He won't even look at you." "Fence doesn't care who's looking," Cade said, and drove out without another word. She turned that answer over for days. It told her more than a speech would have. One evening in the 4th week, she asked him about Dunbar. They were sitting outside, Cade oiling a harness, Nell darning a sock that had been darned twice before by someone less particular. The question came out before she could hold it, which was unusual for a woman who'd spent 2 years weighing every word like evidence. "The man you killed," she said. "What happened?" Cade's hands slowed. He set the harness on the railing. "You said you wouldn't ask about my past. That was your condition for me. I never said it went both ways." Something shifted behind his eyes, not anger, but cost. The look of a man reaching for something he'd put away on a high shelf and hadn't touched in years. "Dunbar was beating a girl," Cade said. 17. She worked at the San Antonio laundry. He'd been at it for months, and she couldn't leave. He held her work contract. "I walked in by accident. Wasn't looking for a fight. Wasn't looking for anything except a card game I'd heard about." He paused. "He came at me with a bottle. I had a knife I'd borrowed that morning to cut rope. One of those pieces of timing that only makes sense if you're not the one living through it. And the jury heard what Dunbar's family paid them to hear. His father owned the freight company in San Antonio. Half the men in that courtroom shipped through his warehouse." Cade picked up the harness. "The girl left town before the trial started. Nobody went looking for her testimony." Nell sat with that for a long time. The sock in her lap needed another stitch, but her hands had forgotten about it. "Why did you come back here?" she asked. "After. Because the 12 acres were already paid for. And because leaving would have meant they were right about me." The letter arrived on a Monday 6 weeks after the wedding. Not addressed to Nell Mercer, addressed to Nell Arden, care of the Redfield post office. The postmaster handed it over with a look that said he'd already studied the return address. She didn't open it there. She walked to the creek behind Cade's property and sat on a rock and held the envelope until her hands stopped shaking. 3 lines from Leland Price, her dead husband's brother. He knew where she was. He had retained an attorney in Fort Worth. He intended to recover property she had removed from the estate, a gold watch, a deed to 8 acres in Alano County, and $300 in banknotes that her husband Josiah had supposedly kept in a strongbox under the kitchen floor. The watch was real. Josiah's father had left it to him, and Nell had taken it, the only thing of value in a house that had felt like a cell for 4 years. The deed was real too. Josiah had signed it over to her after breaking 2 of her ribs, and she'd filed it at the Alano County Land Office before he could change his mind. The $300 was pure invention. Leland was manufacturing a debt, because the truth that his brother had been a violent man whose wife had simply outlasted him was not a story the Price family cared to tell. Josiah had died of pneumonia. The certificate confirmed it. But Leland had spent 2 years telling anyone who'd listened that Nell had refused to send for help, that she'd let the fever take what her hands wouldn't do. She burned the letter at the creek and watched the ash float downstream. That night, Cade set a plate in front of her, and she didn't touch it. "Not hungry," she said. He sat down across from her. "You've been not hungry since Monday." "That's 4 days." "I'm fine." He held her gaze for a moment, then ate his supper without pressing. But she caught him checking the road twice before dark, looking for something he hadn't been told to expect. 2 weeks later, a man rode into Redfield asking questions. Nell was at the Mercantile when she overheard it, the shopkeeper telling his wife that a man from Fort Worth had been in that morning, inquiring about a woman who'd arrived alone in recent months. Dark-haired. Probably using a different name. She set the tin of flour down carefully and walked out. Her hands were steady. Her pulse was not. She found Cade at the barn, shoeing the horse. "Someone's here looking for me," she said. He didn't glance up from the hoof. "I know. He came by this morning. Asked if I'd seen a woman matching your description." What did you say? Told him my wife's name is Nell Mercer, and she's lived here since April. He'll check the courthouse records. The marriage certificate has my maiden name. Cade set the horse's hoof down, straightened. His eyes found hers, steady, unhurried, the face of a man who'd already worked through what he was willing to do before anyone thought to ask. I went to the county clerk this morning, he said. Certificates on file. Your legal name is Nell Mercer. Anything before that belongs to a different county, and unless that man is carrying a warrant signed by a judge, which he isn't, because I asked the sheriff to check, he's got no standing in Redfield. Nell stared at him. You went to the clerk. Before I said a word, you stopped sleeping 3 weeks ago. A man notices. The investigator, a lean man named Caldwell, stayed 4 days. He asked questions at the boarding house, the post office, the mercantile. He wrote everything in a notebook with the deliberate hand of a man who charged by the page. On the 4th day, he rode out to the property. Cade met him at the gate. Nell stood at the front door, close enough to hear every word. I represent the estate of Josiah Price, Caldwell said from his horse. I'm here regarding property that may have been removed. Get off your horse, Cade said. Caldwell dismounted. He was taller than Cade by several inches, but something in the way he held his notebook shifted once they stood on the same ground. The deed to the Llano property was transferred legally, Nell said from the doorway. Filed and recorded at the county land office before my husband died. I have the receipt. Caldwell glanced from Nell to Cade and back. The family's position. The family's position, Nell said, stepping forward into the yard, is that they'd rather pay a man to ride 300 miles than admit Josiah Price broke his wife's ribs and signed away land out of guilt. She stopped 5 feet from Caldwell. You can tell Leland that the deed is on record. The watch was personal property left to me, and the $300 he invented does not exist. If he wants to file a claim, the courthouse in Llano has every document, and so does the one right here in Redfield. Caldwell wrote nothing down. He turned to Cade. Anything to add? She covered it, Cade said. Caldwell rode out that afternoon. Nell watched him from the gate until the dust settled behind his horse. That evening they sat outside while the light drained out of the sky. Not the silence of strangers, the silence of two people who just stood on the same side of something and didn't need to discuss what it meant. Ribs, Cade said quietly. Nell looked at him. He broke your ribs. 2. Left side. The doctor in Llano set them and wrote, "Fall from a horse" in the report because Josiah asked him to. Cade's jaw clenched once, slowly, and then released. His hands hung between his knees. That's why you left, he said. Not a question. I left because he died and his family needed someone to blame. But I stayed married to him for 4 years because I didn't have $7 and a coach ticket. She paused. I'm not what they say I am. I know. How? Because a woman who'd done what they claim would have run a lot farther than Redfield, Texas. He gazed out at the darkening land. And she wouldn't have married the worst man in town on purpose. Nell made a sound that was half breath and half something she hadn't let out in years. Not quite a laugh. The noise a person makes when they've been carrying something so long that setting it down doesn't feel like relief, it feels like breathing for the first time. You're not the worst man in town, she said. Don't tell anyone. Took me years to build that reputation. She reached across the gap between them and set her hand on his forearm. He turned his palm upward and closed his fingers around hers. They stayed like that until the stars came out, which in Redfield, Texas, happened all at once, like someone had been waiting for permission to light them. The following Sunday, Nell walked into church and sat where she always sat. Cade came with her. First time, clean shirt, boots brushed. Old Halston, the rancher whose fence Cade had mended months ago. sat down on Cade's left without a word. Mrs. Ridley, after a hesitation that lasted exactly one hymn, took the seat on Nell's right. After the service, Halston shook Cade's hand in the doorway. Didn't say much, just good fence holds and a nod toward Nell that carried more weight than a speech. "That's the first time anyone's shaken your hand in this town," Nell said on the walk home. "That you've seen," Cade said. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, more the slow rearrangement of a town's opinion when the facts stopped fitting the story they'd been telling. Some adjusted. Some didn't. The shopkeeper's wife still overcharged on sugar until Nell filed a complaint at the county trade office, 2 pages, every discrepancy in a column. The prices started matching after that. The 12 acres on the east side of Redfield turned out to be sitting between the main road and a rail survey corridor approved in Austin the previous year. Nell discovered this at the land office, where she'd gone to verify her own deed records and noticed the survey maps pinned to the back wall. She came home and told Cade his property was worth 4 times what he'd paid. He considered this while mending a saddle strap. "What do you want to do with that?" he asked. "What do you want to do with it?" I asked first. Nell sat down on the porch step. The sunset was doing something unreasonable with the color orange, the kind of sky that made a person forgive Texas for every other hour of the day. "I want to build something," she said. "On our land, with our name on it." Cade set down the saddle. His eyes held hers the way they had on the courthouse steps, steady, unhurried, like a man who'd spent 4 years being wrong about what his life would become and had finally stopped arguing with the correction. "All right," he said. "Let's do that. There's a particular kind of courage that doesn't look like courage from the outside. It looks like a woman on a boarding house porch saying the most dangerous sentence she can think of. It looks like a man on a crate deciding that one word, yes, is worth more than the reputation it will cost him. It looks like 2 people who arrived carrying the worst versions of their own stories and found someone willing to read the rest of the page. Thank you for being here today. If you've ever stood in a room where no one expected you to succeed and did it anyway, or if you've ever been the one person who raised a hand when everyone else looked away, I'd be grateful to hear about it. These stories don't travel far without someone to carry them forward. Same fire, different night. I'll be here when you're ready."